The road will need to be salted. Outbound I-57 is clear. The Bishop Ford Freeway looks fine. So does the Ryan Expressway. I-55 southbound at Lamont Road off the entrance ramp. There's a car in the ditch. Stevenson Expressway looks good. No delays to report on the Edens. Inbound Kennedy at Addison. There's a crash on the right side. Outbound, it's now fine. No problems to report on the Eisenhower or on the area tollways. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Flurries tapering off this morning. Otherwise cloudy, breezy, and a high of 31. Currently 24. Next news 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas Coffee, a family tradition since 1897.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning, Sean from Elmwood Park. And before we get to our discussion on impeachment and our guest, Geoff Shepard, former deputy counsel on Nixon's Watergate defense team, just a quick remark about the siege on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad in response to the strikes that were authorized by the Trump administration on Shia militia targets in Syria and Iraq. Liz Cheney tweeted out this, Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Desperate as their own people rise against them, the Iranian regime is lashing out, killing an American in Iraq last week and now orchestrating attacks against the American embassy in Baghdad. As President Trump has said, they must and will be held accountable. You see, for you Obama, Hillary, Susan Rice apologists, making a comparison to Benghazi you think reflects well on you and poorly on Trump? No. No, this is how you properly, as Liz Cheney did, this is how you properly ascribe responsibility to terrorists, or in this case, a terrorist regime, the mullahs in Iran, as opposed to conjuring up a video as the responsible action as the Obama administration and their prevaricating national security team did with Benghazi. Just so we can compare and contrast the two matters. All right, switching gears. This isn't your father's impeachment. This is an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, co-authored by Geoff Shepard. He is a was deputy counsel on Nixon's Watergate defense team. He's the author of The Real Watergate Scandal, Collusion, Conspiracy, and the Plot That Brought Nixon Down. Very provocative piece that he co-authored that distinguishes the dynamics surrounding the Trump impeachment to those of the Nixon impeachment that could have been, the removal from office that could have been. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Geoff Shepard. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, good to be with you.
So you really provide the important contextual factors in comparing the Nixon imbroglio to the Trump impeachment, the political dynamics, where the economy was, access to media. Why don't you provide that comparison and contrast for us?
Sure. Well, we start with the idea that there are eerie similarities between the two men and the two situations, but there are different facts that's going to lead to a different conclusion. But let's start, if we could, just reviewing the similarities. Both are classic outsiders winning narrow elections in a hugely divisive era. And when they came into Washington, when each was inaugurated, they were opposed by every single D.C.-based institution. Both are pursued by specially selected, highly partisan special prosecutors. But in Nixon's case, there really was an underlying crime. The issue was whether he was involved. In Trump's, there's no crime. There are allegations of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, but those are made up. In Nixon's case, it was a long, drawn-out affair that was largely bipartisan. With Trump's, it's been very quick, highly partisan, and lacks a factual basis. It's really strange. The other key that I would just mention is in Nixon's case, he was a lame duck. So he wasn't going to run for office again. And when you're a lame duck, other supporters start thinking about themselves and what the next election's going to bring. With Trump, it's his first term. So the Republicans have lashed themselves to his mast. There is no second candidate. There is no alternative going into 2020. So you're going to find an absolutely unified Republican Party. And Nixon didn't enjoy that.
Well, the other thing you point out, too, even though Nixon was a lame ducker, deep recession at the time, oil embargo by Middle Eastern countries. And so Nixon didn't have the political capital that Trump has with a good economy.
Absolutely. And normally you would say, the president doesn't really control the economy. I mean, the American voter thinks he does, but he doesn't. But in both of these cases, the president was largely responsible. Trump passed the tax cuts, massive tax cuts, deregulation, and starts putting America first in trade. With Nixon, it was the opposite. He saved Israel during the Yom Kippur War, but triggered the oil embargo. He was faced with a recession and high inflation, and his actions didn't help. So it's not a bad economy triggered Nixon's impeachment. It's that he lacked the benefit of a really strong economy, which Trump has.
Mr. Shepard, my name is Sean Thompson, and I have a question for you because you have a unique perspective. You also worked for Paul Volcker, right?
Yeah.
So his philosophy versus the borrow and spend philosophy was kind of different. He was really an inflation slayer, wasn't he, Paul Volcker? And
well, he came into his own under President Reagan, and he was appointed by Carter, and then under Reagan, he cinched the interest rates so tight that he beat inflation. I worked for him when he was 42 years old at the U.S. Treasury before he was famous, but it was the same guy and the same approach, a really classy, dignified public servant. He was a Democrat. But he was so good, both parties wanted him in their administrations.
He was the rare Democrat and the capitalist. I'm wondering if you, what do you think his acceptance would be of an orchestrated pressure on the Fed, both to lower interest rates and continue a soft quantitative easing?
Well, I don't think he would like public pressure on the Fed. That's not ordinary circumstances, but Trump is brings an attitude into Washington, a very refreshing attitude that says, the old rules just don't apply. I mean, for this thing to work, we got to be pulling in the same direction. And if I perceive that people who technically are a part of my administration are not pulling in the same direction, I'm going to call them out.
I want to go back to impeachment. Paul Waldman writing in the Washington Post, could Democrats impeach Trump twice? They might have to. And he says, don't dismiss this as absurd. It might be necessary because there may be things that are uncovered, the Southern District of New York, all of these concurrent investigations that require them to vote up more articles of impeachment. Yeah. But what does that say about the strength of the articles of impeachment they passed if they're already looking to impeach him a second time to essentially, I would think, make a more persuasive case than they feel they've made?
Well, it just highlights how weak they know their case is. This was hurry up and get this thing out, and we'll see, we'll get this thing underway. And then it turns out they don't have a basis. Obstruction of Congress is a joke. That would mean any committee that says, I want this, I want that, if you don't give it to them, then they can impeach the president. And I suppose as a technical matter, they could be. The American voters not going along with that. That's ludicrous. The abuse of power is the same thing. You can go back to each president, all the way back to George Washington, and there have been stresses and strains amongst the co-equal branches over whose authority and what the limits are on their authority. Everyone's been accused of abuse of power, but not impeached over what amounts to nits. I mean, a presidential phone call to the guy in the Ukraine, or not responding to a thoroughly enough to a congressional subpoena. Those are laughable, and the Democrats know it. That's why Pelosi is slowing this thing down. It's why there's talk of, well, we can do more, we can do better, we can do more, but they're whistling past the graveyard.
Well, and just to continue the tortured arguments that are being made, really shameful arguments. Neil Cattell, who is Obama's Solicitor General, tweeted out that Trump's obstruction of Congress charge, he, as you were describing, he didn't comply with what the demands were. I mean, the point, this is a former Solicitor General of the United States. It was Trump's right to exert executive privilege and the Democrats' choice not to litigate the matter in court, where Trump might have won or he might have been compelled in part or whole to produce what they desired. But they chose not to do so. And I mean, would Neil Cattell tell his clients not to assert their rights in his representation of them? Of course not. It's just so transparently shameful.
In spite of the ain't it horrible attitudes of the other side, Trump has always obeyed the laws. Trump has always complied with judicial orders. In this instance, it was Congress that didn't want to roll the dice. You're absolutely right. They just said, "Oh, we don't have to do that. We'll impeach him." What's so intriguing, if you were there before, that's the third article of impeachment against Nixon, was failure to adhere to a congressional subpoena, and the second article was abuse of power. The only one missing in a comparability analysis is obstruction of justice, which is really the main charge against Nixon.
Right.
And that's what they thought the Mueller report would bring in. And it didn't, but they're not giving up on that. When you went through, well, maybe next year, maybe next year, maybe next year, they're really hoping that they can get access to grand jury testimony served up by Mueller's staff in that report that has to stay secret. And they want to leak that out and say, see, obstruction of justice, this changes everything. But the public is watching this. And it's kind of like, well, we hold on to this thin reed, and then we jump to that thin reed, and then we jump to the next one. And they realize none of this is serious. Every single thing that's going on today, every single allegation is designed for its impact on the 2020 election. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's open witnesses or the president's counsel gets to participate or whether Nancy sends over the articles. Every single person in Washington, D.C. makes a calculation every single day on the perception of fairness to their constituents that's going to come out in the 2020 election. And it's even the safe districts aren't certain because of the American perception of fair play. Americans expect a fair deal. The Republicans are winning this massively because the Democrats are not giving them a fair deal, and it's reflecting. You trot out all these Democrat experts, like the Solicitor General, and they're ruining their own reputation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a cut and paste job, as you're saying, and then we'll work backwards to try and find the evidence to support it. He is Geoff Shepard, Deputy Counsel on Nixon's Watergate defense team, author of The Real Watergate Scandal, Collusion, Conspiracy, and the Plot That Brought Nixon Down. And you want to check out his piece in the Journal, which I'll tweet out. This Isn't Your Father's Impeachment. Geoff Shepard, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Happy New Year.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of nature. Changing the world, one life at a time.
This is better than I expected. You guys, your customer service and everything, you guys are great. Yeah, you're the best company out there as far as nutrition goes, I think. And the commercials, they talk about it, but a lot of times it's like, I don't know if it really gives it true justice of what this really is. People need to know this is maybe the most amazing product I've ever tried. You can just feel the energy. It's so pure. It tastes so good. I'm just blown away by it. It's amazing.
This is the season that focuses on family, faith, and love. This holiday season, Balance of Nature is offering 25% off, a free travel set, and free shipping on your first preferred order of Balance of Nature. This will only be available until the end of the year, so don't wait. Call 800-2468-751. That's 800-2468-751. Or go to Balance